It's one of my favorite games to play, easily, hands down. It is an incredible experience, and the core premise is it's a boss battler. You're fighting these monsters, these giant dragons that need to be taken down, and you're trying to utilize your character with their gadgets and armor and abilities, and then their hand of cards. It's an easy pick because it's the oldest game I have in my collection, along with Seven Wonders. I mentioned I went down the rabbit hole and bought a bunch of games. In those games that I bought the first week or so, there were maybe 30 or so games. 2 of those are still here, and that's Seven Wonders and the...
I've seen some comments on Reddit that I think that you're also familiar, like since you work for Gamefound, does this affect how you review games? How many times do you play a game before you're reviewing them? Like, do you have
Excellent question.
Have you ever had a game that you stopped playing halfway through and that was your first experience?
Absolutely. I don't know. Here's an interesting question. I don't know if I've ever reviewed a game that I didn't finish. And again, it would have been called First Impressions. I'm trying to think if I've ever...
Last Impressions.
Yeah. Have I ever... We call it Last Impressions. That's a good title.
Have you ever had a review copy sent to you, but you weren't able to import the game because some crazy law or customs officers that doesn't allow you to import the game, and the game returns back to the original sender, the publisher, and you had to explain what happened? Have you ever had this experience? Hello everyone, my name is Nizi, and today's guest is Alex from BoardGameCo. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks for having me.
It was really nice to have you on board. Normally, I don't have any chance to make this live for our foreign guests, and thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely. What time is it by you over there?
It's now 5 p.m. What about you?
Okay, so you're reasonable. It's 10 a.m. for me, so that puts you, what, 7 hours ahead? Not too crazy.
Yeah. Good morning to you. No?
Likewise. I'm talking to somebody right now in, oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember what it was. Maybe it was Korea, but they're like 13 hours ahead, which is a whole different problem.
Yeah. Just time zones, which is good though, because we have this chance to, we have internet, we can have this opportunity to connect to each other, which is amazing to me.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. Like when you think about the fact that before we had this, realistically, the ability to connect with people with long distance phone calls, flights that were incredibly expensive, we often take for granted the level of connectivity that we have nowadays.
Yeah, especially I cannot imagine from thinking of the board game design perspective. Back in the 19s, people, I cannot believe how can they manage to co-design games. Just send some mails, actual mails. Yeah, pen pals.
A little pen pal co-designs. That'd be great.
Yeah. Talking about board games, what got you into this hobby with this board gaming?
Oh my gosh. So there's always 2 phases, I think, for most people. There's the phase where they happen to have played a few games, whatever those games would be. For me, those games did include Catan. So I played Catan, I played Carcassonne, I played a Game of Thrones, the board game, Risk 2210. There's a whole phase in my earlier life where I just played a lot of different games, and some of those games happen to be what we would consider designer games. But for me, the point where I moved from happening to have played designer games to where I got pulled into the hobby was, I want to say 2011, late 2011. My brother-in-law started coming home every few months with a game from college university. So he came home with Arkham Horror one time, Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. Then, and that didn't do anything for me quite there. Played it, but didn't really do anything. I'd say around 9 months later, he came home with and I never remember the order of this, but I want to say he came home with Stone Age. I want to say might have been Small World, but either Stone Age or Small World. So he comes home with Stone Age. Let's say Stone Age 9 months later, and then 3 months after that, he comes home with Small World. And it was the back-to-back of 3 months apart of playing Stone Age and playing Small World, both of which I loved. That kind of in my mind there was this little shift of, these are 2 games that I really enjoyed that I never heard of, and that started me researching. And so after the second game specifically, and again, I think it was Small World last, after playing Small World, he went back to university and I went on the computer and I started researching, and I was like, oh, there's a whole world out there. And Small World in particular was one that, because Small World at the time had a whole bunch of expansions. There was Small World Underworld, there was 5 little mini expansions. And so I started adding all of those to a cart on Cool Stuff Inc., which was one of the sites back in the day that I found that doesn't sell board games anymore, but at the time was one of the big board game sites. And I started adding a bunch of items to my cart, started looking at other games, started researching, and started going down the rabbit hole of realizing there were so many tempting boxes full of potential fun. And within the next, few weeks, I had placed several orders on eBay, on Miniature Market, on Cool Stuff Inc., and I had very firmly moved into the rabbit hole.
Yeah, sounds nice. So, what made you think? Like, at what point did you think that okay, I'm going to, start a YouTube channel. I'm gonna start reviewing them. I'm gonna, videoing them and stuff.
You'd have to fast forward 8 years later. There wasn't a single point during the process where I thought I'd start a YouTube channel. I got into the hobby in 2011, started playing board games pretty actively. I did slowly move into other aspects of the hobby. So in 2014, I started. I had been trading. I had been trading games on my own to try to grow and build my collection. As I played games, I wanted to turn those games into other games because if I didn't want to keep it, I want to get something out of it. And so I resorted to trading instead of selling, and trading slowly shifted from a personal way of getting more games into a side hustle, and then from a side hustle into a full business. And I started this website. BoardGameCo was the name of the website originally, and I started a website basically trading and selling games out of my basement. By the end of 2014, that had grown to a point where I had 1,500 games in my basement and was running out of space. And so that's when I shifted to moving it into a warehouse. And that's when I shifted to having employees, a warehouse, all of this stuff, and trying to actually grow a full-on business and not just a side hustle. And that went from 2014 till around 2022, I want to say. But in 2019 was when I started a YouTube channel, because along the way I had friends, like to this day, there's one friend who always likes to tell me I told you should start a YouTube channel, because I had friends who told me oh, you should, cover board games. And it's kind of like how many people who play board games, and I don't know if this is true for everyone, it's an experience that I definitely see, where if you play board games, your non-gamer friends will at some point say, so are you going to design a board game? And it's a very common question, because they're seeing it from the outside and they're seeing how much you like this thing that they don't know. And they're like, well, you have 200 games, you should design one. And it's not always a natural next step. But similarly for me, because I was, running a business around board games and playing board games, I had friends who asked me if I wanted to design games, and I had friends who told me to start a YouTube channel, none of which I entertained at all. But as part of trying to grow BoardGameCo, the online store, in 2019, I started an Instagram. Maybe it might have been 2018 I started Instagram. I did Instagram a little bit here and there. It was never a thing that I was passionate about, but I did it, trying social media. And then in 2019, I started a YouTube channel with the goal of helping the social media of the store. Mm-hmm. But very quickly, I realized that I enjoy talking about board games a lot more than I enjoyed promoting the store. So if you watch my first 15 videos, the first 5 of them say things like, oh, brought to you by BoardGameCo, buy, trade, and sell your way to better collection. But very quickly that goes away. That goes away within the first 15 videos. I just stopped doing that. I stopped caring about that, and I just started talking about board games. And that kind of shifted to, once I started growing an audience, which again, never really intended for this to be the pathway I was on, but that shifted to, I want to say in 2020, I was already realizing that I was going to eventually close down the store and just do YouTube. And in 2022 is when I made the decision to close down the store and just continued with YouTube since then.
Now you're a full-time YouTuber. Do you do something else on the side?
Yes. So I'm also CMO of Gamefound. In 2022, I left so 2022 was a busy year for me because I did several things. I closed down my store. I left my previous job. I had previously been a CMO, a COO of a e-commerce agency. We built websites, and I left that to go full-time into YouTube. That lasted maybe 6 months, because later in 2022, Gamefound reached out and offered me a job, because I had the management experience from my past job, but I had also been covering every single tabletop crowdfunding campaign for the past 3 years, and that put me in a unique position that I had kind of everything they wanted for a CMO position. And so they offered me the job, and I've been doing that as well for the past 3 years straight.
I've seen some comments on Reddit that I think that you're also familiar. Since you work for Gamefound, does this affect how you review games?
So for me personally, I don't believe so. But there's so many different aspects to get to in something like this. But I would say that there's unconscious bias is always a factor. How do you avoid the potential bias that comes into play even when you're trying to be mindful of it? And I don't think it's possible to say you're not biased. I think it is possible to say that you try to be mindful of your bias and possibly even counter your bias. So for example, I know that with Awakened Realms in particular, I know that I probably am harsher on their games since taking, and this is something you can look up. You can look at my reviews of Awakened Realms games before and after me working for Gamefound. And for those who don't know, Awakened Realms has a partial ownership in Gamefound, or that's actually not entirely true. The owner of Awakened Realms has partial ownership of both companies. Yeah. But because of that, if you look at my reviews of Awakened Realms games before and after working for Gamefound, I'm pretty sure that anyone who watched them all would say, yeah, you were more positive on Awakened Realms games before Gamefound, not after. And the reason for that is because they, in particular, I try to be mindful. I'm so mindful of the potential bias that I probably counter a bit too far. If I'm unsure of a rating, like I would say normally, let's say I'm rating a game. If I'm rating a game, let's say a 4.5, or let me rephrase that. If I'm unsure whether I would rate a game a 4.5 or a 4, I might lean to a 4.5. If I'm unsure of what to rate a game and it's a Awakened Realms game, I'm rounding down because I'm trying to counter the perceived bias. And so if anything, I go the other way. And again, this is something, don't take my word for it. Watch my videos, watch my reviews of Awakened Realms titles and see for yourself. But I would say that outside of them, where it's a little easier, unconscious bias is always a factor, and it's something that there's no way to truly be certain of where you are. I do think that if people watch my coverage of games that are on Gamefound, I think you'd be hard pressed to see any favoritism towards a game just because it's on Gamefound. It's something that doesn't even enter my mind. From a conscious perspective, it doesn't enter my mind. I don't think about it. I don't care. If you're on Gamefound and you ask me to review a game, that's on you. I don't care. It's not my problem. With Awakened Realms, I'm certainly conscious of it. With other games, I don't even think I'm conscious of it, but I can't say for sure. The thing I always bring up that is interesting is, to me, the thing people are concerned about is something like Gamefound. But the thing I regularly bring up as something that people should be concerned about that they aren't is how small this space is. I am far more likely to be uncertain how to review a game. Not uncertain. I'm far more likely to be biased towards giving a more favorable language, score, all of that, not because something's on Gamefound, but because that person is someone I'm friendly with in the industry, and I'm going to see them at convention after convention after convention. This is a very small space. Most people know each other. The amount of game designers who I'm friendly with, the amount of companies that I'm friendly with, that is such a bigger bias. Now, the goal, my statement here isn't I'm biased in other ways. I try to be mindful. I try to counter. I try to be mindful. I try to do the best job I can, and hopefully my coverage speaks for itself. But I always find it interesting, the thing people are more concerned about is the thing that doesn't even enter my mind, and the thing people don't think about at all is the thing that's constantly on my mind.
Yeah, well said. I agree with everything that you said just now. Because, like, did you have any favorite reviewers before you start reviewing yourself?
Oh, absolutely. There's so many. How many do you want me to give you? There's a whole bunch.
I mean, let me ask you this way. Have they any of the way that affect your decision to buy or not buy a game? Like a reviewer, maybe like you watch it and you say, oh, he loved this game, so I should buy the game because he loved that game.
So easily the most influential and most consistent on my journey has been Dice Tower. There's no question about it. I've been watching Dice Tower reviews. Now that I've actually had the privilege of meeting Tom Vassell, one of the things I like to say is when I met Tom Vassell at one point, I was like, I used to watch all your game reviews. And he's like, oh, thank you. And I was like, I used to watch them. I'd grab a glass of wine, sit down in the tub and watch, I'd have a bath and just watch, a bunch of board game reviews. He's like, that's too much information. But genuinely, I remember I used to be hard into Dice Tower. They were the channel that I watched the most as far as giving me the most consistent content to be able to decide what games I was interested in. I love the trio of Tom, Z, and Sam. I used to watch a ton of Miami Dice back in the day because, again, this is 2011. The content creator space was very, very different back then. So I would say easily the most consistent was them. There's others as well. Joel Eddy certainly had an influence. I don't watch his stuff as much anymore. He's not as active. But back in the day, I used to watch a lot of drive-through reviews. They certainly had an impact. Again, no one hits the scope or scale of the Dice Tower as far as the impact on my purchasing. So I'd say Dice Tower for sure the most consistent. Joel Eddy, I remember having a soft spot for. I remember as well there was a channel that started that I really liked. They still do stuff, not as much as they did, but there's a channel called Board Game Rewind, which effectively they'd play the games and then they'd give their thoughts right after. That was the premise. Play the game and then right away they'd all give their thoughts. It's almost like a first impressions come out of the playthrough, and that was certainly something I enjoyed. I'd say Rodney Smith Watch It Played was certainly a factor. And then probably the biggest influence shortly before I started doing YouTube reviews myself was I had fallen deep down the crowdfunding rabbit hole, and King of Average was a content creator. He's a little less active nowadays, still active, but a little less so than he used to be. But he was big into the crowdfunding space, and I would say that he was a big impact on me as far as crowdfunding goes. We tend to approach the space very differently. I don't know if you're familiar with his channel, but we have very different approaches to the space, but he was certainly a huge impact on a lot of things because of the level to which he covered crowdfunding.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a personal question.
Always.
Because I've been always doing reviewing stuff before the last year. Some publishers approached me. Sometimes I approach publishers, like I have the biggest board gaming channel in Turkey, so I want to review this game. I'm so excited about this one, etc. But the question is, have you ever had a review copy sent to you, but you weren't able to import the game because some crazy law or customs officers that doesn't allow you to import the game, and the game returns back to the original sender, the publisher, and you had to explain what happened? Have you ever had this experience?
So I haven't had that. I have had something close to that several times, actually, but I've never had a game coming to me that got returned that I know about. If it happened, I don't know about it. Actually, it's not entirely true. I have had some games bounce, but not because of, imports. There's like an address issue one time. Fortunately, nothing big. I would say that's not been the bigger issue. The bigger issue for me has been very often when I cover prototypes, I do have the creator wants their prototypes back. They're hard to create. They're expensive. Prototypes are a lot of work. Even though it's not the final game, it's actually more expensive than the final game. Oh, yeah. And I've had it happen, like, I want to say 4 or 5 times where I spent like $90 shipping a game internationally, some insane price, and then it goes to the creator and it gets returned. So like I pay $90, which means the creator's paying $90. They reimburse me for shipping. It goes to the address, you follow the tracking, and then something happens, and it's like, oh, address not found, or user didn't pick up, and then it gets returned to me. And so now I once again have their game that they still want, and now they have to pay $90 again, and they don't even know if they're going to get it. And that's always been a bit of a slightly tricky situation. Fortunately, I don't have to explain anything because it usually happens on their end, so I never get blamed for it, but I always feel terrible when it happens.
Oh yeah. So about our concept is because that since August 2024, our lovely government decided that we shouldn't import anything if its value is above 30 euros. So anything, if you want to buy a board game that costs, let's say, like 12 euros, usually we pay for shipping about like 17 and 18 euros. That's the maximum board game value that you can buy personally. And because of that, now I review anything games. As a designer, I'm a board game designer and soon to be a publisher later this year. And I signed a game in the States. There's a dexterity game called Pixel Forts. So you know that the publisher will send you a designer copies, like 10 copies. And I said, don't send them to Turkey because I cannot import them. I tell them to send the games to a friend who's living in Germany. And this was like last October. I still I couldn't play the game that I've designed myself to be published in the States, which is crazy. And this is why I'm making this series, because most of our friends in Turkey, there are a lot of gamers, but they cannot buy new games. So every time there is some friends coming in from Holland, from Italy, from States, Japan, whatever, and every time they ask, which game do you want? So the hypothetical situation that I created, I imagined for you that, God forbid, if you had to move to Turkey and leaving all these collection behind, which 5 games would you tell your friend to bring them next to you?
You want all 5 right now?
Let me tell you, so how did you decide which 5 to bring?
Sure. So I had this question recently on a live stream. I think someone asked me, it's a very specific question. Someone asked me, what 7 games would you keep if you only keep 7 games forever? And it was off the cuff. So I kind of gave him I gave 3 answers off the cuff that were easy. And then I was like, I don't know, I'll think about it later. And then we have this, which is kind of the same premise. And to me, there's so many different categories for this kind of question. There's your top 10 board games. That would be easy. I do that every year. I can just go ahead and look and then see if anything's changed. But that top 10 board games are a very different question than if you could only keep 5. If you can only keep 5, and I did a video concept a few times. I think I've done it twice now, where I call it my top 10 desert island games. And that's a little different than your top 10. That's if I could only have 10 games on a desert island, what would I keep? And that's kind of the thought process I have here, just with only 5 instead of 10. And to do that, it's not what are my favorite games? It's if I can't play anything else, what are games that I believe provide a degree of different genres while also giving me the longevity of how much I enjoy them. If a game to me is fairly new, if I've only played it 5 times, 5 times is still a decent amount, but I don't know if that game is going to hold up for 15, 20, 30 plays, and I can only have 5, so I have to be careful here. So I was focused on trying to get solo play, because that's important. I need to be able to play games solo. Focusing on multiplayer, focusing on a few genres, and then to me the big one for this in particular was games that have survived the test of time. They're games that I've played a lot, and I know that I enjoy them after a lot of plays. So that was my thought process for here. It doesn't cover as many categories as my top 10 Desert Island, because 5 is half as many as 10, surprisingly enough. So it's definitely harder to hit everything, but that was kind of my thought process.
Nice. Before that, how many do you have in your background now? Like, how many board games do you have?
So I don't know offhand, and it's also trickier because it's a little divided up. But I would say that looking at my background, yeah, my background is mostly games I own. On this shelf over here to the side, it starts to get to review copies. So my collection is roughly 300 plus games at any given point. It's usually around 300. I think it dropped a bit below 300 last year, but it's usually somewhere in that range. But the tricky part is I'm cheating a little bit because of the nature of my job, meaning covering board games. I don't count unplayed games as being in my collection. My collection is games I've played, and that's it. Because unplayed games is a combination of games I'm interested in, but also a lot of review copies. So there's always a lot of floating games that I want to get rid of, games that just came in. There's a lot of floating games. But in terms of my collection is probably around 300, and the full basement is probably around 500.
Yeah, nice. How many times do you play a game before you're reviewing them? Like, do you have
Excellent question. Yeah, I've given the answer multiple times. The answer is kind of, it's not a specific thing to a specific game. There's a very specific answer. I've done this a bunch, so I can tell you. The first answer is if I've played it once, I don't call it a review. I call it first impressions. So the only guaranteed answer you get is at least 2. If it says review, it's at least 2 times. If it's once, then it's a first impressions, and sometimes I will call it a first impressions, even if I've played it more than once. It depends on the type of game. So a good example is, especially when I'm covering prototypes, sometimes I'll be covering I don't know, sometimes I'll be covering a campaign game, but they'll only give me the first 3 missions. So that I'll play it 3 times, but I'll still call it a first impressions because I didn't get the full experience. As far as the review part, so the review is, I only guarantee that it's at least 2. Outside that, you can ask me, I'll try to answer. I don't mind answering, I'm not trying to hide it, but I just don't announce it every single time, but it's at least 2. And the more common answer is, if I liked it, it's probably 3 to 5. And if I didn't like it, it's probably 2. Because I'll play it a second time and I'll be like, not for me, move on. And didn't like it doesn't mean bad, but like if it's a 3, or lower, 3 out of 5 or lower, then I probably played it twice. I'm not giving it a third play most of the time. There's exceptions, but most of the time I'm not bothering. Once it goes to a 3.5 or higher, it may well have been 3. And if it's a 5 or higher, it probably got more because it was a joy to dive back in. So why not? The more fun it is, the easier it is to keep playing. And then the last answer I give to this is, if it's a campaign game or a legacy game or anything like that, then the answer is not 3 to 5. The answer is usually more along the lines of, I keep playing until I think that nothing new is being added. Meaning, so if I'm playing a campaign game, very often the first 5 or 6 games will have new stuff being slowly added that change my opinion. There's leveling up, there's new content, there's new this. But at a certain point, new content doesn't change the experience. So a campaign game that has, 30 games to play, I might play it 8 to 9 times before putting out a review. I'll usually say that I didn't complete it. I'll try to announce. My biggest thing is transparency. I try to focus on, it's less important to me how many times I played, and it's more important to have a general idea of how much experience I have with it. But usually for campaigns, it's I play until I feel I've seen the majority of the type of experience I'm getting.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Have you ever had a game that you stopped playing halfway through, and that was your first experience?
Absolutely. I don't know. Here's an interesting question. I don't know if I've ever reviewed a game that I didn't finish. And again, it would have been called first impressions. I'm trying to think if I've ever
last impressions.
Yeah, have I ever, we call it last impressions. That's a good title. I don't recall ever putting out a first impressions of a game that I didn't finish. But there certainly have been games I didn't finish. But if I committed to reviewing it, I feel I have to finish a game. Although again, this is where you get into language technicalities. A campaign game that has 30 games, someone I say at 30 games is finishing it, and I very frequently review campaign games that I haven't finished the entire arc.
I'm going to ask one last question about this reviewing stuff, because you're reviewing games professionally. Would you be okay reviewing games only used artwork as AI art?
Yes, but it's okay. So this is a complicated answer. I would say that I am comfortable reviewing a game that only has AI art because there's so many different facets to AI. There's the public perception, there's the moral issues, and then there's the quality of the work. I think I am probably starting to lean a bit away from bad AI, although bad AI
Yeah.
doesn't actually get in the conversation of the moral conversation. There's still a moral conversation at play in terms of either theft or taking people's jobs. Those are two different conversations. But in terms of the quality of it, I at least want the AI art to be good. I just recently reviewed a game, Rise of Myths Cthulhu. I think it's great, and I love the artwork. It is AI. They use AI as part of the process, and I would say that my opinion so far, and this may change over time, my opinion so far is when AI is good, it wasn't only AI. It was AI as part of the process. They used AI, they used artists along the way, they tweaked it, they adjusted it. I don't think I've seen a game that was only AI that also looked good. But yeah, Rise of Myths definitely use AI, and I love the artwork. I think it's great, and that's complicated because there's still the moral question of, and I've done a video on this. I personally don't believe that AI art is theft, but I also still believe that it's complicated and does have issues. Meaning, I believe AI art and the prevalence of it are bad for our industry. So I have very mixed thoughts on it. There's a part of me that wants to say, well, I won't review AI stuff at all because I believe it's bad. On the other hand, I also don't believe it's going anywhere. And so do I want to put my foot in the ground if I don't believe it's going anywhere? And I don't know if I do. And that it's self-serving to a degree. I do believe it's sticking around, and so I don't want to cut off all games that utilize it. And there are games that I'm interested in that use it. So I do review games with AI. I would be theoretically willing to review a game that is all AI, but I think there was a game I reviewed recently called Foxpaw that the AI art was not great. It was not well implemented into the game, and that game had a lot more pushback because as much as people do have a moral issue with it, that moral issue is magnified when the AI is more obvious as opposed to when the AI looks good. People are more forgiving when the AI is good. I'm not trying to blame people or put a double standard. I just think that the more in your face it is, the easier it is to be upset about it. I guess a very weird way to put it is if you buy sneakers that are manufactured with child labor, that's uncomfortable. If your sneakers stamp on the side, manufactured with child labor, it's more uncomfortable. So to me, bad AI versus good AI is almost the equivalent of announcing that you used AI versus not as obvious. But yeah, I would review games with AI. I may change that in the future. As of right now, while I believe it's not going anywhere, I don't think I'm changing that yet.
Yeah, some companies that I personally know that they use AI, but they don't announce it. They just say, "Nah, we don't use AI," but I know the process. I know the artist personally that he used AI to fast sketch and just tweaking. So you're basically using AI, but you're not transparent enough about it. Maybe in future years, people will chill about the AI stuff. Then we'll take it from there.
It's so complicated. They could do an entire video on the subject alone.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe later together. All right. So let's go through your games. Which obviously
Sure.
I don't think that you're in order, right? You just whatever.
Yeah. I'll do, for simplicity's sake, I'll do alphabetical order, and I will
Nice.
ignore those. Okay, so if I'm ignoring those, that means that's going to put us with Castles of Burgundy as the first game. Castle of Burgundy was an easy pick. It's an easy pick because it's the oldest game I have in my collection, along with Seven Wonders. I mentioned I went down the rabbit hole and bought a bunch of games. In those games that I bought the first week or so, there were maybe 30 or so games. 2 of those are still here, and that's Seven Wonders and the Castle of Burgundy. That said, I don't play Seven Wonders a lot anymore. I still have it, and it still comes out at the right time, but it's certainly less played. Versus the Castle of Burgundy, I play on a regular basis. I play it on a monthly basis at least. I have
Edition.
I mean, all of them at this point, but I would say that the majority of my plays now are either online on Board Game Arena or the Awakened Realms Special Edition. I no longer have the original editions, the Awakened Realms Special Edition. I probably should have the original edition because if I want to go to a friend's house, it's just easier. But the Awakened Realms Special Edition is so good as far as the quality of the game on the table that it's the one I want to play. It's the one that's most enjoyable to table. But I have over 200 logged plays over the past 10 years, and I don't actually know how many I have because I only started logging plays in 2017 or so. So I have a lot of plays of Castle Burgundy. It was an easy choice as a game that has stood the test of time and has stood the test of multiple plays.
Do you
My
prefer playing solo or two-player or more?
two, I would say that anything above two-player. I would say in person, I would say two or three, and online, any player count because I usually play asynchronous. So I don't, a
Okay.
fourth player doesn't slow down the game when you're playing asynchronous. When you're playing in real time, four players slows down a little bit. I would say three players is probably my favorite player count, but honestly, two to four are all amazing.
Yeah, guess it was my wife's first choice also about this question. Like we
Nice.
had this special edition. She got it. I was like, okay, this is I'm taking this with you wherever I go. I'm like, well, it's too big.
Nice.
Yeah.
My second game is, again, in alphabetical order, is Cthulhu Death May Die. This is another game that I don't know how many log plays I have. I'd have to check it up, but I think I have something like 70 log plays, somewhere in that range of Cthulhu Death May Die. So it's one that, again, definitely stood the test of multiple plays. And additionally, and one thing I'll say that I assumed for this question that we weren't talking about expansions because the answer might have been tweaked. If I was allowed to include expansions, there are some answers that would be tweaked. In fact, I'll mention one specifically when we get to it. But assuming base game only, just in case, even the base game of Cthulhu Left May Die, I had 50 plus plays before I dove into any expansion content at all. Somewhere in that range, maybe 40 plays. I don't know. I played through all the initial season content and enjoyed it and loved it, and the variability of all of it, the variability of investigators, of the elder gods, of the bosses. I just love the overall experience. I certainly hope that I can have all of it as opposed to just the base game, especially if it's my only game. But it's one of those games that the experience has given me one of the better, powers and abilities and leveling up your characters and that sense of tension as you play, that it's continuously and always a fun time to play. I rarely play it solo. It is playable solo, and I've done so, but I usually play it with two or three players. I think four is not great. Four is doable, but two and three is where the game shines.
It's a co-op game, like
Yes.
where you roll lots of dice.
You roll lots of dice. Yeah.
What do you aim to do in this game?
So the general premise of the game is that you're in every scenario, there's a scenario and an elder god. Now the elder god provides its own rules. So you might be playing against Cthulhu or the king in yellow. Each one provides adjustments to the rules. But the general premise is that you're playing as a bunch of investigators, and the scenario gives you the rules as to how to disrupt the ritual. Because the arc is that the elder god is trying to enter the board and destroy humanity. And if the occultist can complete the ritual, the elder god comes on the board and you all lose and humanity's over. But if you can disrupt the ritual, the elder god will still come onto the board, but he will be weakened and you can actually hurt him. Until you disrupt the ritual, you can't actually hurt him at all. So he's just this giant thing smacking you around that you can't do any damage to. And so your entire point is to try to stop whatever the ritual is. And that's going to be different in different scenarios. In one scenario, it might be moving a bunch of people away from an area. In one scenario, it might be blowing up a bunch of, little bases. It's all these different little scenarios. But in general, what you end up doing as an overarching level is you move your people around the board, you fight small monsters, you try to do the thing that's necessary to complete the scenario. The elder god then pops onto the board as soon as you disrupt the ritual, but at least now you can hurt him, but he's still incredibly strong and powerful and he's hurting you, and hopefully you've powered up your characters enough that you're able to take him out before he takes you out. And then you roll a lot of dice.
Yeah. I think like for your first two games, they're it's still about dice rolling.
Yeah,
different mechanics, but I think you like holding dice, like lots of dice,
yes.
maybe.
Will that continue? No, that's my last dice rolling game.
Okay.
Which brings us to number three. This number three is going to be Crokinole. Crokinole is a dexterity game. It's a little flicking game. It's a giant wooden board, and you flick discs on the board in order to get your discs into the center or as close to the center as possible. That's the entire premise. It plays great as a two-player experience. It plays better as a four-player experience. There's a degree of teamwork as you work with your teammate to try to hit each other's disc or your opponent's disc out of the way. But the core idea of it is you're flicking a disc on a board with the idea that you're trying to get a measure of accuracy in how you flick them and how you take trick shots or hit your opponent or hit into the middle and all of that. It's just a great game. It's one of those games that I can sit down for 4 hours straight playing Crokinole, and I will have an excellent time doing so. I've never regretted a minute I've spent playing Crokinole. It was a last-minute addition to this list because I almost forgot to add it, but I was like, the level, again, I'm going for a variety of experience, and so far I have a very, a nice medium-weight Euro game. I have a incredibly dice-chucking, a Eurotrash, Ameritrash game, not Eurotrash, Ameritrash, and then I have a dexterity game as well, that, again, the main thing about it is that consistency of how long it has held up for me. I've had it in my collection for, 8 years or so, and I have consistently gone back to it, consistently enjoyed it, and I've never regretted a moment spent playing Crokinole.
There's some. I researched it beforehand, like weeks before. Then I found it. Then I cannot find it anymore. There was a new Kickstarter about a new game, like a new take on Crokinole and Carom. There's like a hexagon board, something like new rules. What do you think about
Yeah.
those?
Let me see. One second. So there's a game. I also like a game called Shuffleboard, but I like the small
Yeah.
version of Shuffleboard. I like that a lot. But the reason I bring that up is because they are actually the people who I worked with doing Shuffleboard are doing a different game. I'm trying to remember what it was. It was Karuka. Karuka is the game. It was on crowdfunding at
Yes.
one point. That was a version of Crokinole that I have not played. Not version of Crokinole. A Crokinole adjacent game, and I definitely want to play Karuka. I've heard good things about it. I have not played it myself.
Have you played Monopoly Knockout?
No, never heard of it.
It says Monopoly, like it's made by Hasbro, but it doesn't have anything to do with the rolling dice. It doesn't have dice.
Okay.
It's like shuffleboard. Like there is like a long narrow board that you slide your pawns, like Monopoly pawns, and you bump into each other. And if you go to jail, you pay and you slide it again. So it was a fine dexterity game, like maybe introduced to Monopoly haters. There's this Monopoly haters in the hobby, right?
I mean, listen, as long as it's catering to someone who wants it, I'm happy.
Yeah. Is this your favorite dexterity game, though, Crokinole?
That's complicated. My top 100 this year, I believe I put Shuffleboard above Crokinole. I believe I'd have to check. I'm not actually sure. Let me see if I could probably pull it up right here. My yearly ratings, Crokinole got 15. Shuffleboard was lower than that. Never mind. No, yes, it's my favorite dexterity game. Because I was going to say I played more Shuffleboard this year, but that's because Shuffleboard is new to me. Crokinole I've had for a long time. So this year I happen to have played more games of Shuffleboard. But yeah, I would say Crokinole is my favorite.
Yes, Crokinole. Have you ever tried playing Carom on mobile phone or just on a digital version?
No.
That's I sometimes we have this hobby that you have to sit most of the time, and sometimes I prefer like lying on my bed and still play board games on my phone. Do you do that? Like I don't know, maybe Board Game Arena or digital play.
I mean I hate playing board game Arena on my phone. I do it, but I'm not a fan of it in general. But what I'd say is that I definitely enjoy playing board game adjacent games. So like I'll play things like Slay the Spire or honestly Balatro. I don't know if that counts as board game adjacent, but Balatro is so much fun. So things like that or Hearthstone. I play a lot of Hearthstone nowadays. So I like playing digital. My most common digital games are usually games that are tabletop, just not tabletop. So again, those
Turn-based
three.
games.
Well, or card-based games, I'd say. Card-based games for the most part. So again, Balatro, Slay the Spire, and Hearthstone are all effectively card games. Hearthstone is a TCG that happens to be digital. Slay the Spire is so much of a board game that was inspired by board games and became a board game. And Balatro is inspired by Slay the Spire. So all of those are games that I probably play the most in the video game space. So I enjoy those a lot. And then occasionally I get pulled into other games, but my most common digital games are board games or board game adjacent.
You never try playing official board game adaptations, like digital adaptations, like I don't know, Hero Realms, Scythe, Wingspan.
Yeah, I've done a bunch, and I do enjoy them to a degree. I find those, again, I play a lot of Board Game Arena, but I find most of my digital board games I like on the big screen, not on a phone. Like I have a bunch of apps. I played Sagrada and Ticket to Ride and Everdell and Dune Imperium and all those. I find I very rarely appreciate them unless they're on my computer. There are exceptions, I'm sure, but for the most part, my computer is where it's at. Codenames. I got sucked into Codenames on my phone for a long time, to the point that I actually was playing that one so much that I actually uninstalled it because it was too much.
Yeah, nice. Like for me, we mostly play Yellow and Yangtze on mobile.
Nice.
Because it's easier to see, calculate, wars and revolts, and it's, no setup time. Actually, we can be done with it in 20-25 minutes a game. If it's on the table, it's at least an hour.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's better and more convenient to play digital adaptations.
I agree. I think there's a lot of pros to it. Again, I'm not dissing digital adaptations. Probably 15% of my plays are digital. It's just that for me, it's more computer based.
But you would never review a digital adaptation on your channel?
So I guess that's complicated. It depends on how you look at it. Like Dominion, I actually did a full review for the Dominion digital adaptation. It's very rare that I've done full reviews based off of digital only. In the case of Dominion, I think I've reviewed Dominion. I have to double check. I think I've reviewed Dominion, but I know I've reviewed the Dominion app separately. I will say that it is not uncommon that like when I say, you ask me how many times I play a game, it's very common that some of those plays will be digital. If I can, it usually makes it easier to get more plays in. But I don't think I've ever reviewed a game physically that I've only played digitally unless it was a digital game. So again, I've done it in the case of like Draconis 8. Well, actually, Draconis 8 I didn't review, but Draconis 8 is a game that has an app. So like either way, but yeah. So I'd say the Dominion app is the only one I can think of offhand. Outside of that, I don't think so.
Okay, got it. All right. So what was your number 4 selection?
Number four is Primal: The Awakening. This is one that I debated between two, and because I'm thinking base game only, I chose Primal. Primal: The Awakening is the newest to this list, but it is still one that I've played a lot, and it's the only prototype I've ever played where I kept the box in my background of my set for like the next 3 years while waiting for it to show up. I liked it so much back then, and I liked it so much when it arrived. It's one of my favorite games to play easily, hands down. It is an incredible experience, and the core premise is it's a boss battler. You're fighting these monsters, these giant dragons that need to be taken down, and you're trying to utilize your character with their gadgets and armor and abilities, and then their hand of cards. And the hand of cards is everything. There's a degree of deck building in it, not deck building like Dominion, but rather card construction deck building, where you can adjust your deck before you begin. But the main premise is you use your cards to pay for other cards. So when you have a hand of 5 cards, like you don't actually get to play all of those. Some of those have to be used to pay for other cards, and hopefully you can set up a sequence of chaining effects that allow you to have powerful combos. And that process is incredibly satisfying. The other game I put in this place initially before switching in Primal, because I was thinking base games only, is Marvel Champions. Because Marvel Champions, if I could have all my Marvel Champions, that would take the place of Primal. It's a very similar structure of gameplay as far as that deck construction, as far as the cards paying for other cards, taking down bosses that seem too powerful, but the correct chaining can take you the right direction. I think Marvel Champions, to me, has a lot more game. I like Primal better, to be clear. I think Primal is a more fun game, but Marvel Champions has more variety if you can have a lot of it. If it's just core box, I'm taking Primal.
Okay. So when I take a look at the BGG page of Primal: The Awakening, it says best two-player.
That's 100% true.
Yeah. So overall, on the BGG ratings, do you think these, like, we should trust these, best played with 2?
I mean, trust is a relative term. I believe that they are a good indicator of a good opinion. It doesn't mean your opinion will match. There's always going to be exceptions, but I certainly use it. I use it as a baseline all the time, and there's times where I disagree. There's times where it says best with 4, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I much prefer it with 2. That's certainly true. Like, what's the best player count for Azul? I'm curious on that one, because Azul is like
2.
Is it 2? No way. Is my opinion actually aligning with the majority here? Yeah, you're right. Best with 2. Azul, that's good. Good on BGG. So we should definitely trust it. But as I say, Azul is generally considered to be a higher player count game. But yeah, best with 2 makes sense. It is a best with 2 game. So I frequently use the BGG ratings to help guide me to the ideal player count. And speaking of reviewing, when I review a game, I almost always try to review it based on the ideal player count. I find that reviewing it based off of if a game is best with 2 and you play it at 4, again, if it's close, it's one thing. But if 4 is not the ideal player count, like, why are you doing that? So I can't always do that, because very often I'm covering games that are new, and so they don't have people. Like, if a game just came out and I'm one of the people who has a copy, there's not a lot of opinions out there. But when I can, I use that as a reference. But yeah, Primal is best with 2 in my opinion. I would say after that, I think solo play is great. So my order of preference would be 2, 1, 3, 4. With 4 being the only player count that I actively prefer not. Actively prefer not is a hard thing to say. I'd say that I lean towards not wanting to play it at 4. It's very good at 3. It's very good at 2. It's very good at 1. But best in that order. Yeah.
I'm not asking this for this game, but do you sometimes feel that the game is very well designed for a 2-player game, and they pushed enough components to be able to play 3 or 4 players, but with 3 or more, it doesn't play well? It's just a 2-player game with more components.
Well, doesn't play well is a harder term. It's certainly, I would say this, I don't know if there's ever been a time where I felt the game wasn't good at a higher player count. Even using Azul, which we just talked about. Azul, I think, is an incredible 2-player experience, and I think it's a good 3 or 4 player game. But it's still good 3 or 4 players. It's just that it shines at 2. And the tricky part there is because have I ever played a game where it actively was not good at that player count? I don't know. Instinctively, I want to say 5 is sometimes you get a game that is best at 3, good at 4, and 5 is just too much. But even then, it's tricky because if a game plays decently at a player count, even if it's much worse, the tricky part is you could try to optimize on price point and target audience by lowering the components. But the tricky part is every time you have that happen, like I mentioned, Rise of Myths Cthulhu, it's a 1 to 3 player game, not 1 to 4, 1 to 3. I think that's a better way of making the game shine at those player counts. But you will have people who their main game group is 4, and now they're upset that they can't play it. And you're like, well, it's ideal at 1 to 3. But they're like, sure, but we're 4 people. If you don't make it playable at 4, we won't play it at all, and we want to play the game. And so it's a weird balance if you can't make everyone happy. If you focus on the best target audience, you are being the truest to where the game shines. But if you limit it to the best target audience, you are possibly eliminating the ability for some people to play it who are happy to play it in the less ideal version of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, some games, have you tried Deal with the Devil?
No.
It just says 4 on the box.
Yep.
I really appreciated that risk.
Yeah. I'm happy they did that, but to me, it also eliminated it. If it's only playable at 4, like for me, 4 is not my most common play account. It's probably like, 25% of my plays. And there's so many games that are best with 4 that if a game is only playable with 4, it's going to be hard to table it compared to the other games that I already want to table.
Yeah. And there's this Santorini. It says on the box as 2 to 4. It's essentially a 2-player game.
It's a 2-player game. Yeah, that's a good example. That one should be a 2-player game. I wonder if they changed it in the new edition, but that should be straight up labeled with a 2-player game. Or my compromise for this has always been, I'm okay saying it's a 2-player game with a 4-player variant. You could say that. Yeah. You could say 2-player, 4-player variant included. That's a good compromise of telling you that we've adapted it to include others, but that really it's just a 2-player game.
Yeah, definitely. Well, about your last pick.
Last pick is the first one on this list that was a #1 game for me for 2 years in a row, maybe 3 years in a row. I have to double check, but it was a #1 game for me for a while. It has shifted down. It's still top 10. It's still incredible, but this is Terraforming Mars. Terraforming Mars is a delightful Euro experience that I have so many plays under my belt, both solo as well as multiplayer. Again, if I could include the new Automa, even better. I would love that. If I can't, then I will live with the base game as is, which still has good solo play. But it's just a card smorgasbord of trying to figure out which combinations of cards combined with the board placement are going to result in the most satisfying puzzle, both from a stance of how satisfying it is, but also from a stance of how much there is to tweak to try to work on improving your score or placement in the game. At this point, I debated including it. I did debate because Castle of Burgundy hasn't lost any shine for me, despite the amount of times I've played it. None of the others have so far. They're all holding up just strong. Terraforming Mars, to a certain extent, I have enough plays under my belt of it that it has gotten to a point where there's a little bit more repetition in the play. I still love it, though. I still think it's great, and it has held up for long enough that I know I would continue to enjoy it. But it's the only one that has a dash of luster lost over the amount of times I've played it.
Did you play all the Terraforming Mars stuff that's coming out later, like Terraforming Dice, the Dice game, the card game, the Ares and whatever? I
played Ares Expedition. I still own it. I think it's great. I prefer Terraforming Mars, but I think Ares Expedition is great. The Dice game I do not think is great. I think it's a passable game with the Terraforming Mars on top of it. And then all the expansion content, I've played nearly all the expansion content for Terraforming Mars.
What about the role-playing game?
I have not. I'm not a role player, so I can't say that I engage in that.
So, do you think the mechanics or the theme appeals to you more about Terraforming Mars?
Mechanics, 100%. I'm always a mechanics first person. Theme can pull me in initially, but the thing that holds me there is always mechanics.
Mm-hmm. So, because Terraforming Mars is mostly compared to like the opposite, the Ark Nova comes out later, and compared to Terraforming Mars. Did you also? I think you played Ark Nova.
I have played Ark Nova. I think it's good, but to me, Terraforming Mars is the one I love.
The mechanically, of course.
Yeah, 100% mechanically. Thematically, I'm fine with zoos as much as anything else. I mean, some of my favorite games have a zoo theme. Cascadia is delightful. That would be the same theme as Ark Nova.
Yeah. Nice. So about your 5 games, like these are good picks. And Terraforming Mars is I think among these, other than Crokinole, obviously, the only game localized into Turkish, which is interesting to me because the Turkish community is mostly, they're just getting hold of Catan. This it's like 1990s Germany over here. But Terraforming Mars is liked very much by the audience, which I'm surprised is kind of on the heavier side of games.
Yeah, it's a good one.
So my final question would be, this is inspired by a true story that happened in the Turkish customs. So your friend comes to Turkey and arrives at the airport with his luggage, and the customs officer wants to see, what are these big boxes? Like, what is this all about? Like a dice in the game. And because he doesn't allow the board games to pass in, but he's a gamer, so he was like, he pities on you. I was like, okay, I'm just going to let one game. You can take it with me and pick one. And which one do you hope your friend keep for you?
So for me, it's an easy choice from these five, because as much as I love all of them in different ways, the one that ultimately has stood the test of time the longest and has...
Yeah, I guessed which one you're going to say in my hand, and I'm just waiting if it's correct or not.
Yes, the one that stood the test of time, the longest one, it makes an easy choice, is the Castle of Burgundy.
Yes.
I like all of them. They're all excellent. They're all great, but it's hard to, if I'm only keeping one game, trying to pick Primal, one of the newest over it, would be a mistake. Picking Terraforming Mars, which I already mentioned has lost a drop of its luster over time, would be a mistake. Picking Cthulhu Left May Die, it's a great game, but I think the Euro-ness of Terraforming Mars, of Castle Burgundy, which does have a solo mode as well, in case I want that too. I've actually never played it solo, but I guess I would if it's my only game. It'd be a mistake. The only one that I even debate whether I would pick over Castle Burgundy would be Crokinole. Crokinole is such a enjoyable time, and it's so calming. It's a zen-like experience that it's the only one that even comes close to debating, but Castle Burgundy ultimately would win out.
But the special edition with all the expansions, right?
Oh, if I can, absolutely. Makes it even so much easier. Full Automa, multiple plays, expansions, variants. The Vineyard expansion is a great way to play it. Love it.
Yeah. Have you tried Castle of Burgundy, the dice game? It's like a kind of roll and write.
I believe I have. I've played the card game and the dice game, as well as the Castle of Tuscany, all of which are forgettable.
Yeah. Nothing. I think Castles of Burgundy special edition, definitely a keeper. This is why we named our channel the Keepers of Fun, because we always buy. We used to get at least new games, and we decide, are we going to keep this or not? So that's why we're Keepers of Fun. This is the little story behind the name selection.
Nice.
All right. Really nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I gotta say that you have a really nice gaming table over there, and we have the same in our living room. That you're welcome anytime. If you ever visit Turkey, Ankara, just let me know so we can play some Castles of Burgundy together.
Thank you. I'm always down.
All right. Well, see you next time, I think.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, bye-bye.